Welcome to B&B Movie Reviews. This week, Elvis courts Priscilla. We hold over for winter break. We look over our shoulder because there could be a killer anywhere in our sight, and we marvel at the latest MCU installment. Stay right there. B&B is up next.
I want to be there in the first place, man. Daddy, I'm about to call you back. I don't go imagining things.
Like Aunt Margaret? Scooby?
That's it, woman. I don't want to hear another word.
Was there something you're hiding?
I don't have a goddamn thing to hide. You're just being too goddamn aggressive and demanding. You know, I think you should go see your parents for a little while.
What? I'm not going!
I think you should. Matter of fact, I'll help you. Start packing. Joe!
Yeah, what's up?
Joe, get Stella on the next flight out of here. She's gonna go see her parents for a little while. Get her ticket out of here. Hurry up!
Elvis proceeds to gaslight Priscilla when she confronts him about his infidelity in Sofia Coppola's biopic, Priscilla, based on the book by Priscilla Presley herself. Bryan.
Yes.
This movie is weirdly in conversation with Baz Luhrmann's Elvis film from last year.
Yeah.
How did you react to it with that film so closely in your memory?
It's interesting because watching this movie, I couldn't help but kind of compare, because you're right, it is having a conversation with the Baz Luhrmann Elvis movie. And even from, it's hard to not compare the performances and also the perspective of the different stories they're telling. Of course, Baz Luhrmann is telling a completely different story.
I mean, Baz Luhrmann's movie is in love with Elvis,
Yes,
right? Yeah,
yes.
yeah. And there's less love in the Coppola film towards Elvis. I mean, Elvis is really presented as a predator in Priscilla. And the way that they do that is by basically just presenting how that relationship got together, right? 14-year-old girl,
Yeah.
24-year-old dude.
Yeah.
Gross.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of grooming that's going on in this movie, and it's interesting because Sofia Coppola, who's the director of this film, she said that she wanted to just kind of leave this open for the audience to kind of interpret how they view Elvis. But it's hard to kind of look at it in that way because it feels like Sofia Coppola has a very distinct perspective that she wants to tell with this movie.
Well, I think, that perspective comes through in the casting, right?
Yes.
Yes. Jacob Elordi as Elvis, he's a giant of a man, and he towers over Priscilla in this film. I mean, he's almost like a ghoul or Nosferatu at times. At the same time, he's also incredibly charming, and you can see why he would be irresistible to a 14-year-old.
Yeah.
But the movie, in the beginning, really presents Priscilla as a 14-year-old, and you cannot get away from that fact.
No, the movie doesn't let you as an audience member escape that idea and that disparity of their ages between Jacob Elordi's Elvis and Cailee Spaeny as Priscilla. And you're right, that visual of the two of them and how tall and like long and gangly he is.
Looming he is.
Yeah, very looming over her, which I guess is also part of the visual storytelling of what this story is about. Cailee Spaeny, though, as Priscilla, I think she gives a great performance. But it's interesting, too, because watching this movie, it felt like she was, in Graceland, it felt like she was a prisoner. It reminded me of, like, the Disney princess of Rapunzel. She's in this castle, she's in this house, but she's also a prisoner. Like, she can't really go outside the gates. She almost can't even go outside the front door.
Yeah, and I mean, that's what the film does so well, is it sticks to Priscilla's point of view.
Yes, it does.
And when you're trapped in her point of view, you start to feel the walls closing in the longer she's in this marriage or in this relationship.
It's interesting too, man, because I want to get your thought on this, because the movie is told from Priscilla's point of view, and she's in pretty much every scene of this movie. And there's a point where, for one scene, the movie leaves her perspective, where we kind of get like a confirmation of
what Elvis is up to.
Yeah, and it's interesting that that happens right at the end of the movie when we leave her perspective, when we've been with her the whole time.
Well,
I
I mean, I think the way that that operates is it's confirmation of her fears that, you know, she is little more than a doll to Elvis throughout this movie. You know, he tells her early on, like, never change. And it's told sort of offhandedly, but in the perspective of the rest of the movie, that never change is quite alarming and frightening.
Yeah.
And I also kind of like how it asks you the question of like, if you're in the parental situation here early on, and your daughter comes to you and says like, well, I've been invited to a party where Elvis is, and you say no, how hard of a no can you really give to Elvis?
To Elvis, especially at that time and as big of a star as he was. And like you were alluding to before, is as for Priscilla's parents, it's like you say no, you say yes. At some point, you feel like at some point you're going to lose your daughter either way.
Right.
So
right.
they're almost in a lose-lose situation.
The movie does show Elvis's charm.
It does.
Know, like there are moments in this movie where you're like, okay, well, I'd sell my life to this guy. You know, like I'd go off with him forever.
Yeah.
But I do feel like at a certain point in this film, it becomes a series of montages, and I wish we had stuck a little closer to a thorough narrative, rather than like speeding things along. Like, they try to cover the entire relationship in Priscilla, and because you want to get to the victory, quote unquote, I don't know if you can call it a victory, of Priscilla leaving Elvis, finally reclaiming her life, but so much has to be covered in such a short runtime. And I just felt like it sped along too quickly at moments.
Yeah, what's your rating for this one?
It's a gorgeous looking movie.
Yeah.
It has you confronting and challenging the icon of Elvis that lives in the popular imagination.
Yeah.
We're the B&B show. If we like something, we give it a B+. We don't like it, we give it a B-. I gotta go B+.
Yeah, I was kind of on the fence just because of just how I felt about the movie watching it. Especially, it's a very uncomfortable movie to watch, but I can't deny that I do love the storytelling, and like you say, it's a gorgeous film, and just seeing this story from Priscilla's point of view and everything that she went through with her relationship with Elvis.
And the production design.
The production design is great. So yeah, B+ for me as well. So yeah, those are our thoughts on Priscilla. So yeah, B+ from both of us. So stay right there. When we come back, we're going to hold over for winter break. So stay right there.
If you're buzzed and doing this to make yourself feel okay to drive, you're not okay to drive.
I heard you got stuck with babysitting duty this year. How'd you manage that?
Oh, I don't know. I suppose I failed someone who richly deserved it.
Oh, the Osgood kid? Yeah, he was a real rich and popular combination around here.
It's a plague. And you? You'll be here too?
All by my lonesome. My little sister Peggy and her husband invited me to go visit them in Roxbury, but I feel like it's too soon. Like Curtis will think that I'm abandoning him, you know? This is the last place that my baby and I were together, not including the bus station.
Paul Hunnam and Mary discuss why they are both holding over for the Christmas break in Alexander Payne's latest, The Holdovers. So Brad, The Holdovers. This is a movie I was really looking forward to seeing. I've been a fan of Alexander Payne, but I haven't really seen a lot of his filmography. I'm a huge fan of The Descendants with George Clooney. I think that movie was fantastic. So I saw this movie coming out. It's like, yeah, I definitely needed to catch this one. First thing that I want to talk about is the aesthetic. This feels like Alexander Payne's version of a Grindhouse movie. Just the way that he has that 70s aesthetic and that feel.
I see. So you literally mean like Tarantino and Robert Rodriguez's Grindhouse. Yeah. Because it doesn't feel like a Grindhouse.
No.
No, but it does feel like what Tarantino and Rodriguez were doing with their homage.
Yeah, because it's a movie that feels like it not only takes place in the year 1970, but it's a movie that was filmed and made in 1970.
Yeah.
And I like that he takes that approach to that because it really brings you into that time period and that environment.
And yeah, I agree, and I'm surprised by that, right? Because so often when movies try to recapture the grain of like a classic 70s film, it feels off, right? Like I would say about Grindhouse, like I love what they were trying to do with Grindhouse, but especially in the Planet Terror segment, it doesn't quite feel like of its era.
This a little inauthentic.
Is the closest I've ever experienced a new movie feeling like a 1970s movie.
Exactly.
And that's astonishing.
Yeah.
But beyond that, like narratively, performance-wise, costume, it does, like you say Grindhouse, I was thinking of Hal Ashby's films, you know, movies like The Last Detail with Jack Nicholson. And I know Alexander Payne's a big fan of Hal Ashby. And I think he recreated an Ashby aesthetic in The Holdovers, and I ate it up. But getting even beyond the aesthetic, I think story-wise, extremely compelling.
Yeah, I love the relationship between all three of these characters. I mean, Dominic Sessa, who I'm forgetting the character's name, but he's one of the kids from the Barton Academy who's being held over for Christmas break. So basically, it's when some of these kids aren't able to go home during Christmas or winter break, they usually stay at the school, and then there's a professor that watches over them. And I thought he was great. Divine Joy Randolph, who plays the cook at the school, is great, and then Paul Giamatti as Paul Hunnam. And it's like, they all have these individual stories. They almost feel like they're three lost souls that kind of find each other throughout the course of this movie.
Yeah, they're all spiraling into despair, really. And what this movie is about human connection and looking at the person across from you who you can't possibly imagine being able to relate to, and discovering that actually that person is very similar to you.
Very similar.
And this case, like that recognition allows them to escape that despair that they're sliding into.
Yeah, it's also interesting too because Paul Giamatti's character, I mean, he's kind of like this kind of cantankerous professor that is really hard on these students and doesn't really give them.
And he's angry, right?
He's very angry.
He's righteous. You know, he knows how things should be. And Barton Academy should be a certain way. A Barton man should be a certain way. And the staff is kind of bristling against his righteousness. The students are bristling against his righteousness. He's pushing everyone away, but he cannot not be him, you know?
And it's interesting when we learn a little bit more about his backstory and where he came from and how he got to Barton Academy. And going to your point, how he's not so dissimilar from the character the Dominic Sessa plays in the movie as well. And then like once those walls start to kind of break a little bit and they can actually have that connection, it's beautiful to watch that to kind of unravel.
Yeah, you know, when you dare to fall into the discourse around cinema these days, they talk a lot about like, oh, the mid-budget movie's gone, and we don't make movies for adults anymore. It's superheroes, it's superheroes, it's superheroes. More on that in a moment. But like, this is the movie that we say doesn't get made anymore, and it's being told at the highest level by all departments.
Yes. And we haven't talked about Divine Joy Randolph, her character of Mary Lamb. And I don't know how much we want to give away about her backstory.
Don't.
But, I mean, she gives such a beautiful and understated performance with some of the things that she's dealing with as she's also staying at Barton Academy for over the winter break as well. And she gives a beautiful performance. And,
This is a film that the longer you hang out with these characters, the more you fall in love with them, and the more you dread the end that's inevitably coming. You want to hang out with the Holdovers. And I mean, is there any better compliment that you can give a movie?
Yeah, I mean, I want to go back to Paul Giamatti for a quick second because this movie is bitingly funny. Like, there are moments in this movie that is, and I don't want to say this is a criticism because there are a lot of heartfelt moments that it seems like it could be undercut by some of the humor, but Paul Giamatti is so good because he's a very well-read man. and the way that he can just throw jabs at whether it's some of the staff, some of the students, and I don't know, there's something about that character that is
And Giamatti, as he displayed in Sideways with Alexander Payne,
Okay.
like he's the master of throwing a barb.
Okay.
And they're brutal and they're ugly often, but they're always funny.
Yes.
And there's always a little bit of truth to those barbs,
Yes.
which makes them maybe even more ugly too.
And that made the movie really. That was part of the reason that made this movie so
because you got to chisel
enjoyable.
away his roughness, right?
Yeah.
Because you got to realize that Paul Giamatti, his character is just like a little broken little boy.
Yeah.
Just like Dominic Sessa's character.
Yeah, absolutely. What's your rating for this one?
Loved it. One of my favorite movies of the year.
Yeah.
Probably my favorite movie that we're going to review on this show. Gotta go B+.
B+, same here. I agree. I think it's one of the better movies I've seen this year. Could possibly crack my top 10. We're at the end of the year, so we'll see where it lands.
We're thinking.
But easily is one of the better movies I've seen this year. So B+ for me. So those are our thoughts on The Holdovers. When we return, look over your shoulder because there could be a killer behind you. So stay right there. Ooh.
It's not.
Forbid empathy. Empathy is weakness. Weakness is vulnerability. Each and every step of the way, ask yourself, what's in it for me? This is what it takes. What you must commit yourself to. If you want to succeed. Simple.
The killer aims for his target, but when the attempt goes wrong, he becomes the hit by his employer in this sleek graphic novel adaptation by David Fincher, The Killer.
The Killer, Brad.
This movie was so much fun.
It was. I like this movie a lot.
It's wall-to-wall narration. What did you think about that approach?
I like hearing his internal monologue, especially like when he kind of goes through I guess it's like his little mantra of what he's saying. It's like, don't show empathy, don't, do this, always be precise. So it's like he's going through this, but it's funny because as the movie kind of goes along, when, this hit goes wrong, he's constantly repeating this, but he's also his actions are kind of going against it.
I thought this movie was kind of a stealth comedy because those first 15 minutes you're like, oh, look at this guy. He has it all figured out. He's got to shut off emotions, no connections with humanity. And then you go like, oh, does he have a girlfriend? Yes. Can he shut off his emotions? No, he cannot. What you're watching throughout the rest of this film is him not living up to his mantra.
Exactly.
And it's darkly comic.
Yeah, it's funny too because we've talked about some of David Fincher's previous movies. I know you mentioned Gone Girl, and you kind of brought my attention to the humor that he brings.
Gone Girl's wild.
Yeah, and I never really saw it that way. So as I was watching The Killer, I had that in mind with this idea of some of the dark humor that he's bringing to this, some of the subversive humor that he's bringing to this. And I think that's part of it is through Michael Fassbender's character when he starts going after some of these other people and it's not really going the way that he planned or the way that he thinks he's approaching this.
Or he's just full on not doing what he says he will do.
He will do.
He's ignoring what he knows a good hitman would do. Yeah. I think when this trailer first dropped, people were like, oh, we're going to get the David Fincher who made Girl with a Dragon Tattoo or Seven even. This is going to be a thriller.
It's the writer from Seven.
And it is a thriller, but you have to appreciate just living inside this maniac's head. And I think if you're looking for another Seven, you're not going to get it.
No, this is not Seven at all.
I think that the way the movie handles those bursts of violence is very effective.
Yeah.
And it's interesting to compare those bursts of violence in The Killer to what we were talking about a couple weeks ago with Killers of the Flower Moon and the way that Martin Scorsese handles the violence.
Yeah.
There's a slight difference, but it's very slight. And I liked and I appreciated that that degree of difference between how Scorsese shoots the violence and the way that Fincher shoots the violence. Fincher allows space for comedy.
He does.
You know,
he does.
A totally different subject matter than Killers of the Flower Moon.
But going to that point where you have those bursts and those shocks, those shocking moments and those bursts of violence, and I don't want to give too much away about this movie, although I don't even know if you could really spoil this movie, but how did you feel about the ending when he got, because it almost has kind of like this Kill Bill effect where he's kind of like working his way to the top, but when he gets there, like...
Well, I loved it. Like to me, the movie is all about subversion, and what the movie is really about is this guy not living up to his own code, right? And then accepting that he is actually just like all of us. You know, we're all hypocrites. Like,
interesting.
That was my big takeaway of The Killer.
Okay. I can see that.
I loved the final confrontation. And I loved the final shot, and I loved the final line of the movie. But even before we get to that, when we meet his double in Tilda Swinton, the conversation that they have in that restaurant is powerful.
I love that.
Is really, really good.
I love that. I love that. And I love the structure of it, how it, you know, you have like the chapters and then the title cards. I loved all that. But what's your rating for
I thought this movie was a blast. Like I said, I think it's actually quite funny. I gotta go B+.
Yeah, this is a B+ too. I mean, this is David Fincher. I don't want to say it's at his best, but this is the type of David Fincher I like to watch. So yeah, and Michael Fassbender, I mean, it's just
nice to have him back.
Yes,
it's been a while.
It's been a while. So those are our thoughts on The Killer. When we return, we are going to talk about the latest MCU film, The Marvels. Stay right there.
Going to cheerleading camp next to the abandoned insane asylum, it's like throwing your blood away.
50% of Americans like watching blood get spilled in horror movies, but only 3% donate it.
Now that's scary.
Friend of yours?
Hi.
Kamala Khan gets caught up in a fight where her powers start switching with Carol Danvers in the latest MCU installment, The Marvels. So, Brad,
yes,
there's a lot of conversation around this movie.
Yeah. As long as the conversation's about the movie, I'm happy. Exactly. I don't care at all. I'm so sick and tired of the discourse around the MCU. I don't care. Make good movies and I'll show up. Just keep making good movies.
Yeah, like I said, I mean, whether you like it, you don't like it, but let's get into the actual movie.
Yes,
now,
please, Bryan.
So we saw this movie together at a press screening, and I gotta say, we enjoyed our experience watching the movie. Now, I will say that the movie is not perfect, and I do have some issues, mainly with the script. But I think the chemistry between the three leads, I think Kamala Khan really steals this movie. I think Brie Larson has probably been the best that she's been as Captain Marvel, and I really liked Monica Rambeau's character, and I think
Teyonah Parris,
Teyonah Parris. So I think they do a lot, especially like there's a lot of history between these characters as well.
I think the movie is joyful. Like, I had a great time with it. I think I liked the movie even more than you did. I appreciated the comedy of this film. I appreciated the relationships of this film. You know, you say it's not a perfect movie, but there are so few perfect movies, and who wants perfect movies, right?
True, that's true.
Like, I think we get so hung up with like, this is not the best MCU movie. Well, that's okay. It doesn't have to be the best MCU movie. It just has to be a good time at the film, and it has at the movies, and it has to, you know, be truthful to its characters. And I think that this movie is. And Iman Vellani, who we knew was a star after Ms. Marvel, just shines in this film, and give her all the scenes in all the movies, and I'll be happy.
Yeah, I mean, going to Kamala Khan, I mean, Ms. Marvel, which her Disney Plus show is one of my favorite shows that's Disney that what Marvel has done since the inception of Disney Plus. And I really like the chemistry that she has with her family. I mean, Iman Vellani, the way she plays Kamala Khan is so likable.
Yeah, and she's us, right? Like she's the
a
nerd
fan.
who finds her way into her nerddom. Like we all want to be hanging out with Nick Fury and the Avengers, and she gets to do it. And the way that Iman Vellani plays that fandom is so infectious and so relatable.
Very relatable.
And it's loving. Like this is a very loving movie, and that's what I liked about it. Now, some of the special effects, Marvel's got an issue right now, right? They're stretched so thin.
Yeah.
I think some of the blue screen work in this movie is awful. But you know what? I don't care. I still watch Ray Harryhausen movies, and I'm able to, stretch my imagination and fully engage with these characters. And I was able to do that here.
Yeah.
I do think the movie is a little too short, because there are scenes in this film that are really great, and I think they could have been extended, and they would have been even better.
Well, see, and that's my issue with the movie overall. Because I think because of the runtime of the movie, there are scenes in this movie between the characters that I feel kind of get cut short, that need to breathe a little more. Because there's a history between Carol Danvers and Monica Rambeau that that they need to kind of work through their issues, and they have a couple of scenes together, but it kind of
a few more, or at least to have those scenes be a little longer.
Yeah, because it seems like for us as Marvel fans, as MCU fans, we're kind of bringing that history to the movie, where it's almost like the movie itself is not really giving these characters time to really kind of have these characters work through their issues.
I think that they recognized in the edit that Iman Vellani is a star, and that the Ms. Marvel character is the most interesting character amongst the group, at least the way that it's written here, and that she sort of consumes all the big emotional beats of the film, and we lose the stuff between Monica and Carol. And we lose, maybe a little more empathy or understanding of the villain in this film.
Yeah, and that was another big issue for me too, was the villain, where again, I think they have the bones of a great story, because the motivation of the villain with her home world and how she views Carol Danvers for what she blames her for doing to her home world, all of that stuff makes sense.
But they have to get through it so quickly, right? The villain feels like a Marvel Phase 1 or a Phase 2 villain. The whole movie kind of feels like a Phase 2 movie, and I'm not mad about it, right? Like I'm totally fine with the level of Marvel movie that this is. And it is building to something, and I do like all the characters here, and I want to see more of the characters. It leaves me wanting more. And that's really all I need from the Marvels.
There's two big sequences that take really big swings when they go to a planet. I don't want to give too much away, even though at this point a lot of people are saying we can talk a little
directly from the comic books. It's from the Kelly Sue DeConnick run. It's the musical planet, right? And that's one of those scenes where I could have used 10 more minutes of song and dance.
I think that's probably the issue, that a lot of people say they either didn't like that.
People with like cold hearts, who are dead inside. Like they know no joy, so they can't appreciate a musical.
But I wish they would have kind of taken it further.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
And then the Flirkin scene.
The Flirkin scene, memory, Barbara Streisand. You either get it or you don't, but if you get it so good. I would also say, though, that there's an action scene, like the first action scene with the body swapping. I think it's one of the best action sequences that we've had in the MCU.
It's a lot of fun.
I could have actually used another one of those. Like, I wish this sequel had a sequel to that scene later on in the movie.
Yeah, I thought that action sequence and the montage where they're trying to work with their powers in sync together. I thought that montage sequence.
Jumping rope.
All that stuff was great, but I wish they would have extended those a little further. But what's your rating for this?
I had so much fun with it. I've already seen it twice. Absolutely a B+.
Yeah, I'm gonna go the same. It's a B+ for me. I really enjoyed it. The chemistry between all of them, and I'm curious to see where we head from what they teased at the end.
Oh, the stinger, Bryan.
With both of those, I'm excited to see where they could go if they, keep.
Deadpool 3 is where they're going next. The only MC movie
for next year. So yeah, we'll see where that goes. So yeah, so those are our thoughts on the Marvel. So let's recap what we reviewed this week. So we start with Priscilla. Me and Brad, we both give that a B+. The Holdovers, we give that a B+, one of the better movies of the year. The Killer, that is a B+ for us. And The Marvels, we also give that movie a B+. Wow.
A lot of good movies.
A lot of good movies. B+ is all the way around. There we go. So thank you for joining us on this latest episode of B&B Movie Reviews. Come be a part of the conversation. If you have questions, suggestions, feel free to email us at bnbmoviereviews@gmail.com. And with that, we will see you at the movies.